everyone. I'm Julian, and this is the Inside Scoop podcast. I just want to start and say thank you to everyone, regardless if this is the first time watching or if you've been with me all season long. I just want to say thank you to everyone. I started this over the past summer, and it's grown bigger than I've thought so far, and I've had a lot of fun with this. So I just wanted to start this one out and say thank you. With that being said, we have a boys AA state tournament preview with John Conley joining me for the third time this season. Welcome in, John.
Yeah, Julian, I'm super excited. It's kind of like completing the circuit. We had a season preview, and to blow our own horn, anybody want to go back and watch that? It aged really well. Had a real good crystal ball at what ended up happening throughout the state. And then we previewed the favorite time of year for me, those 10 days where we figure out who's going to the state tournament. And here we are with a state tournament preview. So it kind of completes the circuit, and I really appreciate the chance to get back on with you.
Yeah, I'm super excited. We got 8 teams. We'll have a fun, for today, we'll have a fun 3 days of nonstop hockey, the quarterfinals, the semis, and the championship. But first, we want to warm you guys up. We have the top 10 for Mr. Hockey, and we have a solid number of guys in the AA tournament. One Class A guy, Hirschfeld for Cathedral, who gets the go to the state tournament for Class A. But I'm really excited, John. I want to get your initial thoughts on who you're leaning towards winning Mr. Hockey this season.
Yeah, Julian, that's a great question. First, just to contrast it with last year, I thought if you made a list of the likely candidates to start the year, they were the same that showed up at the end of the year. And it was kind of independent of what happened during the season. We saw a breakout season for Heath Nelson. He did not get any consideration as a finalist. We had players from the big teams, multiple players that were being watched at Minnetonka, Chanhassen, and Wayzata. And in the end, some of them were making the final list that were outscored by players on their own team and really hadn't separated themselves from the crowd of great players on their own team. So I contrast that to this year, where if you made a list to start the season, you have the same guys at the end. They all delivered. They all had good years. And I want to look at the 10, maybe talk about one outsider who could have been but wasn't, and then break the 10 into some different categories. So if it went to 11, I'd include Junior Podine. He was one that was kind of on the cusp and just not enough room for all the great players. He had a really good season for Benilde St. Margaret's and just, probably missed by a hair. So for me, the story of the season has been a big 5. And when I look at those 5, I think 3 have a chance to win. And then with the other 5, just a quick run through some names here. 2 defensemen made the list. Toll from Rosemont, Gertis from Rogers, and great seasons. I just never thought they were in the mix to win Mr. Hockey. Certainly the 2 front runners for the defenseman award, Reed Larson, and a lot of people maybe for the 3rd, but I'd be shocked if it's not coming down between those 2. These players will do great. Post-high school, Brent Solomon, I was singing his praises through the Elite League, just unbelievable. Might have the highest ceiling of all with his style of play and his shot. Kind of buried on a obscurity relative to the others, playing on a Champlain Park team that was good, not great. So he's one of the other 5. Rude transferred from Park Cottage Grove, had a good year for St. Thomas, very good year. And Hirschfeld, who you mentioned. My big 5, I think it comes down to a 3-way race to win. Henry Lechner from Holy Angels ran into his coach the other night at the Edina Wayzata game and said something about 200 points. He corrected me and said it was either 260 or 270 high school points, almost 100 this year.
Wow.
So I just think voters, if you put down Henry Lechner, just what a season, what a career, everything we should celebrate in high school hockey. I think Jensen was right there with him for leading the state in scoring, which is rare for kids AA playing a strong schedule like Rogers did. And Kraft, top scorer on a Moorhead team that enters as the number 1 seed and could win their first state title. So the other 2 from my top 5 that just I'd be surprised if they won. Sam Pear, committed to Holy Cross, absolutely love his game from Hill Murray. great season. And Cooper Simpson, just a great story. Thought we lost him from a high school hockey fan perspective, signed a tender, started last season with a junior team in the USH, and came back to play his junior year, came back to play his senior year. White gloves at the, Hockey Day, Minnesota. Those great jerseys that Shakopee wore, followed by Dream State all year. There's just a ton of attention on this team, and they're a team that's playing well at the end, and he had a great season, and, he's a great player too. But I think Lechner, Jensen, Kraft. I think if I had a vote, it's going for Lechner. So how about you, Julian?
We're pretty similar. I'm a huge fan of Kraft leading the number one team in the state tournament. I wish you can give it to three guys because they're all so neck and neck and they're all great in their own ways. And I'm going to replace your Lechner with Cooper Simpson. I like his game a little bit more, and I think just his ability to help lead Shakopee to the state tournament means a lot, where unfortunately Lechner, just as great as he is, and he's had a tremendous high school career, especially in terms of points, he just hasn't been able to lead Holy Angels past the semifinals. Now, granted, he's a part of, and a lot of people say, the best section in play, right? Edina, Wayzata, Benilde, all tough teams with depth that Holy Angels hasn't exactly had. But I think it's personally down to Jensen and Kraft. If I really had to narrow it to two, the third would be Simpson. But Jensen and Kraft, I don't think you can go wrong with either. They've been outstanding. I've gotten the honor to see Jensen play numerous times, and he's been on the show. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Mason Jensen and the Rogers High School program, go look at that video. He's a really good kid. So I'm kind of rooting for him. But Mason Kraft, if he wins it, which honestly, I think he will, like if I just had to bet, I would be completely okay with it.
Yeah, so foreshadowing, 2 points that you brought up that lead to the rest of the conversation. I think Mr. Hockey, my takeaway, pretty wide open compared to most years. And that's certainly the same with the AA field. And you talk about, say, being a strong section year to year. Creighton never got to the state tournament when they were in Section 6AA. They had Matt Gleason, they had some great teams, but they never reached the state tournament. And as soon as they were reassigned, they had a run of a few years in Section A. And that was interrupted in double overtime last night with St. Thomas getting through. So just shows what a big hill it was for Holy Angels to climb. And what I'll remember about Henry Lechner is his arrival on campus was part of a nice 4-year run where Coach Pat Griswold had a team getting better and better. And they kind of arrived with a real gaudy record in Lechner's freshman year, had a great team for where they'd come from, kind of getting up from mediocre to being one to follow, and culminating with the team this year was on just about everybody's preseason top 10, kind of hovered right around that top 10 all year. And coming into the section semifinal, I don't think anybody would have been surprised if they would have beaten Edina, state's top line in my book and most fun team that I saw this year to follow. So those are the things I'll remember about Henry Lechner. Whoever wins, a very deserving candidate, a great year for Minnesota high school hockey. No matter what people say about high school hockey being dead, year in, year out, they are proven wrong over and over and over. Look at that final 10 list. These are phenomenal hockey players. They obviously have options to play a lot of places. And the pendulum's swinging back the other way. Kids want to play high school hockey, and there's so many reasons why, and this state tournament is going to celebrate.
Yeah, and we get to see a number of those players showcased in the state tournament at the next level on the big stage. So hopefully we wish them all luck at the X this next week. Leading into that, we finally know the matchups that are going to be happening on Thursday. We have seeds 1 through 8, the first time that we get to have 6 through 8 seeded as well, even though historically I've always just said, oh, they're the 6th seed, they're the 7th seed. I've just kind of rolled with it. But this year we're officially 6 through 8. I got to say, John, there's a few shockers on this list, but for number 1, I don't think there's really any argument to say they're not. Moorhead gets the 1 seed.
Yeah, Julian, what I've learned about myself over the last few years is very confident in my ability to pick and predict forecast what's happening on the ice. And again, plug the podcast. Julian and I did 2 of them. Look at the preseason. Look at the section preview. Julian knows. I was telling people mid-season, Shakopee's the most oversold team in the state. They've got a very easy path to state. And, a lot of these things come true when it comes to picking what happens on the ice. With that, the other side of the coin is I'm really bad at predicting what people are going to do when they speculate on who is seated where. Edina number 1 over Wayzata was a big curveball to me at Section A. The section has historically valued teams and what they did with the games within their own section, and especially when it came down to 2 teams head-to-head. Carrying that thought through, there were some head-scratchers for me. I like 6 of the teams with bona fide chances to win the state title, so it's not about predicting how they're going to do. I love Stillwater. I announced their game this year where they really housed Benilde. I think it was like 8-3. I'd have to check the final, but there was just no question they were an elite team and followed their season, very familiar. But they entered the state tournament with 1 win and 1 loss against state tournament teams. They lost to Rogers. They beat St. Thomas late. And they've had some weird things about schedule. There's a holiday block where they're not always available. The coach takes a trip. According to a tournament promoter, he tells me they're gone. The family's gone every other year for Christmas. So they don't get a chance to get those great non-conference opponents. They play in a big conference. They have a lot of games accounted for. And it's not like looking at St. Thomas, Moorhead, Hill Murray, Edina. Hey, who'd you play? Well, we played everybody. And they were given a very favorable seeding in terms of stature. Now, separate question is, where do you want to be seated with this? It's such a loaded field, and they draw an intriguing game in the opening round. And I'll let you talk about, what's happened with transfers.
Yeah, it's, I think, the most intriguing matchup of the quarterfinals. So you have Cal Conway transfer from Andover. He transfers over to Stillwater. And then there was some eligibility issues to begin the season. Stillwater in person beats, Maple Grove and Eden Prairie. Yes. However, the Minnesota State High School League deems those, reality wins to losses on paper. So Stillwater enters 22.
Coming off the board like the 97 Final Four for the Gophers men's basketball. Those are in the books as losses.
So they go in the books, and so that's just a little controversial with that. But then now Stillwater has Conway back as eligible, so I think we're past that. But now he gets to play his former team, and I think that's super cool. And of course, Andover's story without Conway, they started out 0-9, and there's been, a lot of those games were 1-possession games, but things just didn't go their way. But ever since that 0-9 start, they beat a really good Rosemount squad. They beat a really good Holy Angel squad to finish the year. They have the head-to-head victory over Rogers, which is huge. And, when you if you take away the opening 9 losses, Andover's played like a top 10 team in Class AA. I don't know how in the heck they're doing it, but they've been really successful. They beat a solid Grand Rapids and Rock Ridge team to get to the state tournament. They're gifted the 7th seed despite with 13 losses on the regular season. But we'll see. I think those 2 teams should really battle it out. And I can't wait to see the student sections and see what the kids brew up.
This isn't really a prediction show, but I'm going to make one. I don't see them battling it out. I think Stillwater boat races them. So just to add to your thoughts, my opinion here, Andover entered sections with a losing record. They were 12-13. Turnaround, clearly, they were 0-9. And I've heard it called the Battle for Boxing Day. I've heard it called the Massacre on Boxing Day. And it was them against the 10-0 Rosemont, and they beat them. And it was really one-sided, like 6-1 or something crazy. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that was a turning point in their season. And they did well after that. It was 6-1. They did well after that. But they have a good goalie. And just some context for people that maybe don't follow the youth hockey as close. USA Hockey has national camp. Each affiliate has a tryout process. Minnesota, in in boiling everything down, whittling the field down, sent one 16-year-old and one 17-year-old goalie to national camp. It was Cal Conway from Andover High, Cash Cruitt, Andover High. So now you have two goalies at the same high school, and they both want to play. And Coach Manny has a goalie that went to national camp in Cash Cruitt. He's very good as well. So I'm not a huge Taylor Swift fan. I'm mad respect for her as an artist and a person. But what's that one song, Julian? What's that one song that she sings? Because I think it applies here. I think now we've got bad blood, and I think the perception of this transfer, the animosity that may still linger, is real, but it's also separate from the hockey. Andover's doing just fine. And this is a Stillwater team that's really good, senior heavy. We trace back 3 years, runner-up state Bantam tournament. They had some players that did pretty well in Elite League. They had some players that didn't play Elite League that are the leading scorers, and they look really good all season long. And I think that one is a really favorable draw for Stillwater. Instead of being thrown into the hopper where I thought they would, with a seed somewhere 3 through 6, having a team in their first round that's their equal, they play a lesser team that's had a good year and benefited from being in one of the two sections that just aren't the same as getting through. Stillwater had to beat White Bear, huge rivalry game, the section semi. They had to take out Hill Murray. That game is not an easy one, huge rivalry game. And they won't surprise me at all if they end up winning the state tournament, and it's going to be fun to watch. So I know it's not really a prediction show. That's not what we prepared for, but you think this is a close battle. I'll be surprised if it is. And 11 o'clock rolls around real early. The state tournament wake-up call, some of these games are kind of over by the first period if somebody doesn't answer the bell. So it's going to be a tall order for Andover to hang with a loaded Ponies team.
Stillwater's great. I've had them in my preseason top 10, and a lot of people didn't really have that. So I've been a fan of Stillwater for sure. But I don't know, Andover, they've just been doing it. I don't know how they've been doing it, but they've just been competitive. They've been playing really good hockey. We'll see. And I don't want to get too caught up in my initial reaction. I was personally surprised at Stillwater being as high as 2. Here is my thought process behind it. You mentioned this earlier. Stillwater has a head-to-head over St. Thomas Academy and a loss against Rogers. That's it.
1-1 in games against state tournament entrants. They only played 2.
Yeah. And what I'm kind of getting is how could you put them ahead of Edina and Rogers and STA? 'Cause you're almost kind of giving me thoughts of, well, all you really have to do is you can just play a weak non-conference schedule, and you just got to win your section, and you're going to gift them the 2 seed. I get it's so difficult, and when you get to the head-to-head, we're spinning circles here. STA beat Rogers, Stillwater beat STA, but Rogers beat Stillwater, and it's so we can go back and forth and talk about head-to-heads all day long, and we would be spinning in circles. We wouldn't be getting anywhere. I just do think the lack of playing teams and non-conference teams, and to give them the 2 seed above Rogers, above STA, even above Edina, I kind of had Stillwater projected at my 5 seed. So to see them at 2, it's a little bit high, but at the same time, I think the top 6 teams in this state tournament field are loaded, and it's neck and neck, and we could have one of those teams. One of the 6 could win the state championship. So, and Stillwater's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm handicapping the race, I would never argue with somebody that said, hey, they're my 2 pick to win it all. Like, betting man, that's not where I'm coming from. I was surprised they were given, as a result of the process, the 2 seed. And equally, I was really surprised that Andover got the 7 seed over Lakeville South. We'll talk about Lakeville South later, but I keep hearing about this turnaround, like, they were 0-9, and now they're whatever they are, 15-13. They still lost. And let's look at the recent losses. February 4th, they lost 3-1 to Blaine. And February 11th, they lost 4-0 to Centennial. Nobody else in the state tournament was losing to teams like that. Not regularly. And, that's the one thing where I've talked to many people. This isn't like one guy. You just keep hearing, Andover sevens, Well, what about Lakeville South when Andover at the end of the year has these really bad losses too for a state tournament team? So anyway, enough about my opinions on Stillwater Andover. I think Stillwater wins that game handily. And I think we could talk about all the juju for the Andover kids to stick it to Cal Conway. What about Cal Conway's motivation? He's a great goaltender. He knows it. He's on a great team, and he wants to win a state championship too. He's very motivated. So going to be exciting. And, little plot twist, Cal's brother was on the championship Andover team a couple of years ago, right? Like, he's very familiar with the family and the program at Andover. And, just circumstances. We have a hard time getting goalies post high school opportunities. It's not going to be real easy splitting time or not playing. You can't beat on another national level goalie. So anyway, I wish all the kids well, and I expect a decent showing from Andover, but they're not as good of a team, and Stillwater should win. By the time you play 51 minutes, I think Stillwater wins fairly easily.
Okay, good prediction. Yeah, I do think Stillwater wins, but I'm hoping Andover gives them a good fight. Moving on to the 3 and the 6, I mean, what a game this is going to be. If you're not happy with Andover Stillwater, you get St. Thomas Academy, a team that was blowing the pants off of everyone to begin the year. They couldn't make it past Moorhead. You lose to Hill Murray. Then they kind of started to fall off a little bit. You lose to Stillwater. You lose to a good but not great Maple Grove team. Scoring was a little bit of an issue. And then last night, as we're recording this, they make the section final. They play a really tough Cretin-Derham Hall team who has dominated the section 3AA since they entered and made the switch from 6. And STA finally gets over the hump. Double OT brings down the Raiders to punch their way to the state tournament for the first time in a few years. And they have to go up against the 6th seed, the Shakopee Sabres, who were my preseason. By the way, John, these two teams were my preseason 1 and 2. I had Shakopee at my 1. I had STA at the 2. So I'm happy to see that both teams have made the state tournament and are competing against each other in the quarterfinals. Shakopee hasn't made the state tournament since 2005. A lot of people think they've never made it at all. They have when they were in Class A, but this is the first time they've made it since they were AA. They bring it past a little bit of a weaker Section 2 AA. This is not the best Tonka team we've seen. EP goes down in the semis. Shakopee, though, they have looked really good since that Hermantown loss that we talked about earlier, where they outshot Hermantown well throughout that game. And ever since then, Shakopee has looked like the Sabres that I think a lot of us projected them to be. This is really a solid 3 and 6 matchup that can go either way. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely can go either way. This is St. Thomas Academy for all you Mr. T fans. I said a couple days ago, because I didn't see Shakopee being anything other than 6. I figured when every section played out, Shakopee was not going to be able to be seated higher than 6. They just couldn't. They didn't have enough wins over other tournament teams. And I said, I pity the fool for you Mr. T fans that draws the 3 seed. And appropriately enough for you Mr. T fans, it was St. T that wound up as the 3 seed. A bit of a surprise. I thought St. Thomas would be number 2. And this is the best AA team St. Thomas has had. They were Class A. They were a big villain. Move up, move up, move up. They moved up, and they kind of ran the table in 3 a lot. And I remember seeing them beat Burnsville one year in a very good final. It was 1-0 empty net goal, 2-0. But as you mentioned, you get Cretin out of 6, and now Cretin can get through, or they couldn't get through a crowded 6. And Mark Strobel in his first year, pendulum swings the other way. Very good group here at St. Thomas. They could win the state tournament, and they survived a gauntlet. They had a middle of the season, Christmas break, beat Edina 2-1, lost 4-1 to Moorhead, lost 2-1 to Moorhead, beat Edina 3-0, and in the middle of all that, beat Hill Murray. So, and that loss to Moorhead, by the way, is overtime. So, regulation ties. So, this is a team that got through a gauntlet, tailed off a little at the end of the year. I was surprised it cost them in the seeding. Lost 2-4 to Stillwater, 4-7 to Maple Grove. That's kind of a head scratcher. 3-0 to Hill Murray. So, really like St. Thomas. And last podcast, anybody that saw it, I was just banging the drum for Shakopee. You said Hermantown was kind of a turning point. For me, it was a long ways before that. Lot of bright lights on them this year. Dream State, Hockey Day, Minnesota. They took in some transfers. They had an injury in goal, and they really had trouble getting settled. The low point, and it was low. I was there. They were abysmal. I mean, it was embarrassing how bad the team had played for a team with the players that are on it. And they lost 6-2 Boxing Day against Benilde St. Margaret's. Things got better right away. They looked pretty good. Took out Champlain Park 5-1 the next day and beat Andover 3-1 the following. So when you add it all up, their last 7, Shakopee is 16 wins, a regulation tie with Hermantown. And in that game with Hermantown, it's on the road. You can pull up the box score. They outshot them more than 2-1. I think it was like 44-20 or something like that. So that's the Shakopee team I expected. And that's how the Sabres have played. And there's talk of a Dream State curse. Evidence doesn't lie. Teams have participated and not achieved what was expected. And this is a team that, because of Dream State coinciding with hosting Hockey Day Minnesota and all the expectations in the world, they just crashed right out of the gate. I mean, this is Evel Knievel, Snake River Canyon, just straight down. And I announced their loss to Holy Family. I walked out of the building and said that would never happen again. Section final, I figured 3-goal game. It's 4-0. They're a team that's playing like we thought they would. So for me, Julian, the aberration was early, and it isn't something that turned around after Hermantown. I'm going back a month before that, and it was really that low point against Benilde. And credit Benilde, they did what they had to do, and they just kicked their tails up and down the ice. But the next day, Shakopee put in different line combinations, and the team played much better, and they've more or less stayed with the similar rotation throughout. And Owen Lunneborg has been a very good transfer for them that has played well. So I'll flip a coin. I'm going to think it's an even game, and I will, if I'm forced to predict, I'm going to say Shakopee. I remember telling everybody all year long when they oversold Shakopee, I'm going to get the last laugh when they're playing Friday night at the X. I just thought this was a team that, you get to the Final Four, and what are you going to say? You could beat 12 losses, and if you get through your section and win a quarterfinal game, get to the semis at the X, you're clearly one of the better teams at the end of the year. And I'd like to see Shakopee achieve what was my preseason expectation. When I had them preseason number 1, is that my pick to win state? I don't know. I think, kind of a group when you're picking back in November. But really like what I've seen. So 22-5-1, 3-1 against other teams in the state tournament. They did benefit from playing Lakeville South in their conference twice. So not everybody got to play Lakeville South twice, but we'll talk more about South. And 16, the 1 regulation tie, overtime loss to Hermantown, last 17. I'm going to ride the Sabres, and I hope they wear the white gloves.
That would be a pretty cool sighting. I think that is a very even game with STA. If I really have to go, I'm going to go STA. I think they figured it out, and I like Cody Neeson. I've seen STA play a few times this year in sections, and they're really solid. They've got a lot of depth, which I think is huge. But Shakopee, this is what makes this great. I just don't know, and we're going to have to find out Thursday at 1 p.m. I do like Shakopee. It's an even game with St. Thomas Academy. I think it is a pick'em. I've seen STA play a few times this season. They've got a lot of depth. And Cody Neeson, I have to give him the benefit of the doubt. When he's on, he's one of the best goalies in the state. And I just have to assume that he's going to be on 1 p.m. at the X Thursday. So I am going to roll with the Cadets. And for the record, I did think they deserved the 2 seed. But again, we don't need to go too much. We don't need to talk about that. We have the 4 and the 5, which I think is going to be a really interesting matchup. Rogers gets the 4, Edina with the 5. I think Rogers should have
We're going
been
to
the
kick
3.
it to the nightcap now. You're jumping around on me.
I'm sorry. We're going to go with the 4 and the 5. Rogers
has got to be a little hacked off. 4-2-1 against state tournament teams. Just had the tie with Moorhead, and they get seeded in a 4-5 game against the defending state champs. So you got to beat everybody if you're going to win the state title. You're going to have to beat the teams that are in front of you. Coach Dave Brown and the team may have placed a little bit of a chip on their shoulder with a 4 seeding. They probably felt they conceivably could have been as high as 2. And instead, they play in the nightcap, which is good for me. I'm going to be able to watch the game. It's about 8:30 when that one will kick off. And really wanted to see Edina play. You know, it's a team that was a crossbar away from overtime in a 1-8 section quarterfinal against the Armstrong Cooper Wings just a couple of days ago. Yet here we are, perennial state tournament entrants, defending champs. We're runners-up the year before that. Coach that's been there before, and I'm sure they're very pleased to play against Rogers in their opening game. And they have a style of play they can flip to, where they try to neutralize other teams' top players. You mentioned Mason Jensen earlier, and Parker DeShane, another high-scoring forward for them. So probably a little bit more of a chess match in this game than there would be if they played in November, December.
This matchup is really intriguing to me. So I have not seen Edina play in person this season, but I've seen Rogers more than any other team in the tournament. And Rogers deservedly won their section, and I think should have been seated a little bit higher, but you get what you get. The one thing that I noticed with Rogers that they have done every single game that I've done play-by-play for them this season is they score in bunches. They scored 3 goals in 4 minutes against Champlain Park in the section final. They scored 1 to begin the period in the first, and then they didn't score the rest of the game. I think if you're Edina, it's going to be difficult to shut Rogers out because they're too good. DeShane, you have one of the best lines in the state. Mason Jensen, Keaton Wise, and Parker DeShane paired with the defense of Nolan Gertis. You have that first front line of skaters. You have 2 Mr. Hockey semifinalists right there. You have Jaden Kurtz, a very solid defenseman. And then you have the second D pairing, Jackson Smith Connect, Colorado College commit, Maddie Hauser, who's a very solid defenseman as well. We've talked a lot about them in our preseason show. I was really a big fan of Rogers, and I think they're one of the more deeper teams in terms of defensemen. If you can, I don't think you're going to be able to shut them down completely. I don't think Edina is that good.
Well,
but
that's interesting. He doesn't have to shut them out. You know, this is a team. And I'll just make a case here for there's a reason why Edina wins so much, and it wasn't just Willard Eichela. Coach Giles, Aslickson, Blueston, Harding, Terwilliger. These are guys that have been there many, many times. And, you know, they've coached in games against other good players. It's not the first time they've run into Mason Jensen, Parker DeShane, Keaton Wise. 2 years ago, they just happened to be wearing blue jerseys. It was Javon Moore and Hagen Burrows and the Twins for Gary. I'll go back to that state championship game 2 years ago where they locked down Minnetonka. Edina didn't play a very pretty game, and they had a chance to maybe win with a lucky bounce they never got. And when I talked to Coach Terwilliger over the summer after, he said it wasn't fun to watch. He goes, well, we played the way we had to play. Absolutely, you did. So, you know, they'll pick up the stat sheet. They'll watch a little bit of film. They'll see, oh, this guy's pretty good. And how do we neutralize that? So I hear what you're saying. They don't have to keep them to 0 points, but I just will be really surprised if they're scoring in bunches on Edina, who's getting very good goaltending right now from Chase Bjorgard, who missed a large portion of the season with injury. So, you know, I'm curious to see it play out. I think it's another coin toss. And I think you can kind of throw out, 80, 90 points right now for a Mason Kraft or a Mason Jensen. When you get to the state tournament, you play against the Edina team that's got a lot of defensemen that won the state title last year, and will be scheming to take those scoring chances away. And this is the gritty part that kept Rogers from reaching the state tournament the last multiple years. We always heard how good they were. They're high flying. They score a bunch, but they couldn't get through the region. And it's a great matchup, not just two good teams, but also the chess match. If you're really a student of the game, super exciting. But, I hear what you're saying, big scores. They don't have to shut out that line. If they can keep them to 1 or 2 goals. Edina's got some high-powered players themselves. And what I saw in the section final against Wayzata, in a close game that could have gone either way, down the stretch, the great players made great plays. Freddie Schneider, Mason West. Hey, maybe tomorrow it's Pitsley, Vandertop. They've got a lot of really good players themselves, and it's going to be a great game. It's probably my choice for the best opening round game by a smidge over Stillwater St. Thomas, but I could see people arguing the other way.
I think it should be a really close game. I think like Shakopee and STA, it's going to be, a toss-up. I am personally going to go with Edina. I mean, I mentioned this again, like Rogers does score in bunches. And I think what Edina just needs to do is if they score against you, just, you got to neutralize them and shut them down, because this is a team that, I mean, they scored 4 against Champlain Park in the section final. 3 of those 4 were within a 4-minute time span of each other. So I think if you're Edina, that's all you really have to do is if they score once, okay, they scored, you have to accept it. Don't let them get hot or too hot. I do think, though, Edina's experience at being at the X really helps them. They know the drill. They have their routine. Rogers just doesn't have that. And this doesn't translate, if you don't have state tournament experience, you can't win. That doesn't translate and exactly mean that. However, I think it gives you a pretty good idea that, just looking at this matchup as a whole, Edina, they know what to do. They know what to do to win. And Rogers, it's a completely different game playing at the X versus playing at other high school rinks. And Edina knows that. Rogers doesn't. So that's why I'm giving the slight edge to the Hornets. And I do think Rogers does have a chip on their shoulder for being ranked at 4. They probably think they deserve to be higher. So I think that could give them an advantage. However, I don't want to say, my guess would be the Royals did not want to play the defending state champions, the most experienced team in the whole state tournament.
Yeah, and that's the tough part is you look at the top teams, and I think there's 6 that could win it. So you'd probably like to be seeded 1 or 2, but if you're not, you're really not going to avoid another great opponent. So, it's true Rogers making their first state tournament appearance has not been there, but Coach Brown has. He was an assistant when Wayzata won. I don't know, it's almost 10 years now, but it seems more recent than that. And I don't think either one of these teams would sign up for the 4-5 because it's a really crappy draw. If they would reach the championship game, that's 3 games in 48 hours. And it's a lot better if you have the number 1 seed plays at 6:00 and kind of kick their heels, get to bed early, and just have a normal Friday. Or if you're on the other side of the draw, you have another half a day with, the game around, 11 or 1:30. So anyway, I don't think anyone would sign up for 4-5, but none of them are afraid of each other. And it's kind of nice. If you're going to win the state title, let's get rid of Moorhead in the semi, and then we'll have that behind us and then play one more game for all the marbles. Super excited. I'll be watching that one. I've got some troubles with availability on a plane when some of those afternoon, I think the early ones, probably the one I miss all of, and I probably miss half of the second game. So I was glad when it was a nighttime game. That works well for me in that I wanted to see Edina. I'm pretty familiar with, a number of the families with kids on the team and defending champs. And like all the teams, I think it's a great tournament. I would have loved to see Homer there too, but I love Stillwater and would have liked to see Cretin, but I really like St. Thomas. So it's fun. It's the best state tournament I've seen on paper, and it will not disappoint. There's just no way that we have a flat state tournament coming up this week. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I think overall, my overall takeaway, it's going to be a great state tournament. I think it's going to be competitive. We're going to see some really good competitive games on Thursday. Of course, semifinal Friday. I mean, it might be the best overall day in high school hockey. You get to see 4 semifinals between Class A and Double A. The championships would all be great. Of course, you get to play at the best venue in Minnesota at the XL Energy Center, which is super cool. And before we go, the final question is, who's taking the crown? Who are your 2024-2025 high school boys hockey state champions?
Well, let's go over one game before we do that. Can we cover Moorhead Lakeville? Because,
Okay.
I mean,
That's
Moorhead
fine.
enters as the number 1 seed. I saw them the first game of the year. I announced their loss to Wayzata. It was a game that went to overtime. And the next day, they just really ran Edina out of the building. They kept Edina from having much puck possession. And I was really in awe of how they were able to go and run 2 lines. And I kept thinking, by the end of the second, it's going to catch up with them. They resurfaced. I thought, certainly this is going to catch up with them. And what I saw were kids that were in really good shape. They were conditioned. And I think that bodes well for state tournament play. This is a Moorhead team. We've said it many, many times. There's always some great Moorhead teams that have been in the mix to win a state title, but they've got the number 1 seed. They've got a very, very good group. They won the state Bantam tournament 3 years ago, beating Stillwater. They were runners-up 2 years ago. And I think I was announcing some of these kids when they won the state Pee Wee 4 years ago. So a lot of familiarity with the kids. They've certainly played in very big games throughout youth. Down year last year for the high school, which is really inexplicable. It's kind of weird how they didn't even reach the section final. But they enter the tournament. They're 5-0-1 against the other teams. That tie coming against Rogers. Overall record 25-2-1, and clearly, betting odds, if you calculate something, a favorite, because they don't have a coin toss game to start like so many of the teams do. And if I had to pick one team, I would pick Moorhead. I think they're 5-2 at best, maybe 3-1, but nobody's a prohibitive favorite. But I do think Moorhead's a front runner, and it's a great story with the community up there. Many of the players, it's not just Cullen and Kraft. Many of the players have fathers who are part of them coming into prominence in the. So I think, unless you hate potatoes, we'd all be happy to see Moorhead finally break through and win. And on the other side of the ice is an interesting group. I saw Lakeville South last year. Their high watermark was beating Rogers at Christmas time, and it was Rogers' low point. It was kind of a game they would like back. But I thought, there's a lot of young players. I thought Lakeville South would be pretty good this year. And the season started, and they weren't. They did not do very well out of the gate. They weren't in games. Lost 4-0 to Creighton, 7-3 Rosemont, Shakopee 5-1. 5-2 Rogers. I mean, those are 3-4 goal losses. They weren't able to compete against those type of teams early, and kind of came to a head. They lost 9-3 to Minnetonka, followed by 7-0 Rosemont. But after a little breather against New Prague, things turned around for them January 4th. They had a road date. They had a road date at Braemar, and it was a regulation tie against a Edina team that has at times looked great this year. They split with Hill Murray, both overtime games, 2 regulation ties, Edina winning one. And Julian, 2 days ago, I think consensus was Hill Murray was the number 1 seed if they made the tournament. So how good's Lakeville South? Their turning point game after that, they went 13-1. The one being a loss to Shakopee, the best team that they face on their schedule in their conference. And I think Coach Storm and the kids are kind of curious to see how far do we take it. We got through the section. We're in the state tournament, and I think they'd have an easier time if they were playing Stillwater, the 2 seed. I don't see them beating Moorhead, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're playing on Saturday. I don't think that this is just a given that they're 2-0. It's a better team than a lot of people realize, and I think a lot of people kind of stopped following what's going on down south of the river, Section 1, when they got off to such a bad start. And I talked to Calvin Simon not too long ago. He was scouting a game that I was announcing, trying to see who they'd face in the section final, Hoy Family and Eden Prairie. We talked between periods. He said, start of the year, we were just gathering data points. We wanted to get the team, find out what we have, be ready at the end of the year. And that's a hallmark of championship teams, is they tend to play better at the end of the year than they do at the beginning. And I'd put Lakeville South in the same boat. So Shakopee, Lakeville South, Andover, these are teams that are playing very well at the end. And I'm kind of willing to look past what happened really early, as it's almost 3 months ago. So I think that last game, is easy win for Moorhead just because they're so good. But Lakeville South will not be a slouch. They'll hold their heads high throughout the week and maybe even play 3 games. And with that, if you push me to pick one team, it's going to be Moorhead. They have a favorable draw in the first round. They've got a team that's certainly as good, or on a good day better, than the other 5 that you and I think are in the mix to win it all. I also said 5-2 at best. So what is that? 30, not even a 30% chance of winning. So I think it's more likely that one of the field wins in a very wide open state tournament. And this is what we love. This is why we tune in. And this is why I will say, for all the reports about high school hockey's demise going back as long as I can remember, it's never true.
I think, I didn't mean to jump ahead. I forgot about that matchup. I'm not going to lie. I think if you're Lakeville South, I saw them play at Hockey Day, Minnesota. I got to call their game against. They played Prior Lake. They're a good team. I think they're the definition of a solid, quality hockey team. This is a team who's also very familiar at making the state tournament. They didn't make it last year. They were upset by Rochester Century John Marshall, but historically, they always come out of 1AA. I think if you get them, the best I can give them, if they play their best game and you catch Moorhead off guard and you just catch the Spuds on an off day, you maybe beat them. But if Moorhead plays well, they should easily win. They've got depth. They've got, I think what's really important, they've got guys who are winners. They won Pee Wee. They won Bantam. They're winners. And we can discuss and analyze statistics and schedule all you want, but they're winners. And I think this is what makes potentially the semifinals interesting, assuming Moorhead wins. I've got Edina beating Rogers. You have 2 programs who know how to win. Then that would be the semifinals between the Hornets and the Spuds. Moorhead
that's familiar foes in high stakes game. That was a rematch of 2 years ago. State Bantam went to double overtime. And Julian, just for people who maybe don't follow it super, super close, like you and I do, if anybody's kind of curious about the complexion of these teams, Edina, Moorhead, and Shakopee will be as good next year. They really don't lose a ton, and they've got a lot back and great players. Stillwater, this is a chance for them this year, and they will tail off a fair amount. They're senior heavy, and St. Thomas will not be as strong next year. So I just think that's, I think Rogers is good, not as good. So there's 3 teams that maybe tail off a little, and there's 3 teams that are going to be just as good, and because they're younger, and we'll see what that means. I would think playing against Stillwater could be tough for some of these teams, but for all the excitement around Moorhead, not a ton of seniors. Obviously, Cullen and Kraft carrying a lot of the scoring load, but Tyden Bergeson and Zach Zimmerman and one of the 5 Cullens, they're going to be really good next year. They're going to be real good next year too. So anyway, that's about all I've got. I'm super excited.
Oh,
so you're
cool.
You're picking.
I have to go with Moorhead. Looking at the road to Saturday, you're more often than not you beat Lakeville South. Yes, Rogers tied you, and if Rogers makes it out of the first round, I think they can make things interesting. However, Edina's proven to me is they're great, but they're not the best.
Yeah, for sure.
So I would have to go Moorhead there, and then whoever makes it out of the other side of the bracket. I mean, it could be literally Shako, it could be STA or Stillwater, whoever. I'd like Moorhead. It just seems like it's written in the stars for the Spuds. You don't make the section final for the first time in 20 plus years with the squad who didn't really perform all that well. And then you go and you have such a dominant season and you make the state tournament. And for the first time in school history, you bring the championship home. So I'm going with the Moorhead Spuds, as I think we may have lost you, John. I'm going to do my outro here. We're going to roll out the outro. The Elfie's gone. All right. Well, with that being said, if you made it this far, thank you so much. I hope you learned something and you're going to take a bit of this or all of this. It's all a great time. Let's have some fun with it. Thank you for listening to this Inside Scoop podcast, the final episode of the 2024-2025 season. We'll see you next year. Everybody, stay blessed and have a good one.